The Buffalo Bills will be featured on HBO's Hard Knocks. We're talking about that today on the Wandering Buffalo podcast.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network. My name is Justin, and I am your host, and just a few lighthearted things to talk about today. And fortunately for this offseason for the Bills, we continue getting little snippets of newsy type things and nothing really like earth-shattering, but usually we get to mid-May and there's really not much going on. We do have OTAs about to fire up and, some other things. And usually around that time until we get to training camps, there's really not much of anything. And that may end up still being the case this year. But as of right now, it keeps being little snippets of news-like stuff. And one of those items being this Hallmark movie that is coming out for the Bills, the Christmas movie. I still know very little about this movie. I'm going to do the thing where I'm going to try to avoid knowing anything about this movie as long as possible and just go see it and have very low expectations and enjoy it for what it is. And it's a Hallmark movie. Not typically my favorite brand of film, but I feel like this one could end up being like a draft day type movie where, like, from an objective standpoint, I know the draft day movie is objectively not a good movie. It's not a great portrayal of how everything works with the draft, but it's like a guilty pleasure that, almost becomes like whatever, call it like comfort food. I'm sure that's how this Hallmark movie is going to end up for the Bills. In the meantime, I know there's lists coming out with like all the players that are going to be featured in it, and I've caught a glance of it, but like when I see those posts, I try to scroll real quick. I don't want to know. I want everything in the movie to just, oh, hey, there's Sean McDermott, whatever. So until I see that movie, that's about my stance on it. And once I watch it, we'll go from there. Another thing that came out, and this is from the owners' meetings, two big things that I want to touch on here. Number one, the tush push ban has not passed. There are like five votes short of it, something like that. I will say that this very likely will be the last year of the tush push being in the game. From the last owners meetings earlier in the year, it was right at like a 50-50 split. It gained more momentum as we got to this set of owners meetings, and I think it's a matter of time. One thing that I do think is pretty interesting about this not passing is the Bills voting for banning the tush push while the other three teams in the AFC East voted to abolish it. And I think that's just an interesting, we'll call it strategy from those teams. Just being with how successful the Bills have been using the play, still weird to me that the Bills are, and McDermott, being on the competition committee, are like spearheading banning the play. I think equally interesting, all three of the division opponents for the Bills that got beat up by it are in favor of keeping it. So we'll see what happens there. It's going to be present in this upcoming season. I think it's a very, very likely outcome that this will be the last year that we see that play in the game. And also from the owners meeting, I think this one is a really cool one. The addition of the Protector of the Year award, and this being spearheaded by our very own Dion Dawkins. I think somebody that could have a very strong case to win this award in its inception year. But I think whether or not he ever wins it, I think this is a really cool thing to have attached to a Bills player of a season-long award like Offensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player, all these awards that we have, MVP, including an award that acknowledges awesome offensive line play. I think it'll be interesting to see how it works out, and it's going to take some time to collect some data on it, I guess, of trends and whatnot. I feel like this could very well end up being like the MVP award, typically being a quarterback award. I feel like this is going to end up being pretty exclusively a tackle award. I could be wrong on that, but we'll see where it goes. But I do think that it's really cool that this will be tied to Dion Dawkins' legacy. Like, not only the great player that he is, the great personality that he is, the person that he is in the community for the Bills, like all of these things just stacking up on who he is as a person and a player. Him being on the team and being a representative of the Bills and making these like consistent splashes, it just makes me even more proud that he's on the team. Like, not only is he doing things like this, like he's a consistent finalist for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, just on and off the field, all around a great player, person, easy guy to root for, and I love that being part of our team. The last thing I want to talk about on today's episode is the Bills getting the nod for the training camp version of Hard Knocks. And there's some differing opinions that I've seen out there of, is this good for the organization? You're opening up what's been under Bean and McDermott, like a very closed set. You don't get a ton of access. Like, media is blocked out of a lot of things that they used to have access to. It's just like a very buttoned up organization. And I do think back to this time-ish last year when the Giants were announced for Hard Knocks and McDermott had a quote on it, which I don't have the quote, but basically it was better you than me type deal. So I do think it's interesting that the Bills get the nod for it. And there's been discourse out there about, this being a distraction for the team, or like there's never been a Super Bowl winner that's been featured on Hard Knocks and some things like that. And honestly, I think there's maybe some to an extent distraction factors, whatever, like that. I think I would maybe feel differently about it if this was the in-season Hard Knocks of, you're in the stretch of the season, you got cameras following you around through tough losses, adversity, different stuff like that. Training camp, I don't think that we get to the end of the season and whether the Bills win the Super Bowl, they get eliminated in the divisional round, the championship round. I don't think that by the time we get to January, February, we're like, man, this would have been different had Hard Knocks not happened. So, kind of with that in mind, I am super excited to be able to watch this. I think part of it for me is just what I had mentioned on how, like, close to the vest and tight-lipped this organization's been under Bean and McDermott, to kind of get a behind the scenes look at everything and how they prepare and all that stuff. Seeing them in meetings, seeing, pregame speeches, seeing Brandon Bean have to make tough cuts, seeing Bean and McDermott discuss, roster decisions and philosophies and why we might be keeping a guy over a different guy. Also, being in training camp, I don't have like a ton of concerns about, opposing teams catching glimpses of our playbook or anything like that. Like, if you've watched Hard Knocks, it's not like super in depth on like the X's and O's. They like to follow around really popular players on the team. They follow along with like fringe roster guys and their stories of like how they've gotten to where they are and what it looks like for them to make the roster. And you fall in love with a couple of guys who, on a normal year they might be like the 65th guy that would have made the roster, but they were a pretty easy cut candidate. And then, you kind of see their story and you fall in love with them a little bit more. And then it's that much tougher to see them get cut. Things like that. And I've really enjoyed the show of Hard Knocks in general with, following teams that I don't really care about. From a Bills perspective, like, you just can't feed me enough content. I'm looking out for the embedded episodes all the time. And like, this to me is like embedded on steroids. And you get more access, you get more episodes. The production is even better. The episodes are longer. There's just more things that'll be covered. So I'm super excited to see that. This one that I just really want to nip in the bud real quick is the narrative out there that like no team has ever won the Super Bowl that's been featured on Hard Knocks. Like, okay, cool. If you look at some of these teams that have been featured over the years, like, it's usually not teams that have had lofty aspirations, and maybe other teams have signed up for it to kind of boost the PR and maybe sell more tickets, things like that. But I mean, with this organization, I feel like you're just going to get like a better behind the scenes view at like how an organization's supposed to be run. I mean, you look at some recent teams, like we had the Jets with Aaron Rodgers on there, and like, okay, that season was a train wreck, and whether or not Aaron Rodgers played, I don't think it was going to go well, but he was hurt 4 games into the season and didn't come back. We've had the Browns on there that have continually been a dumpster fire. You had I think it was the Rams on there when they changed locations. I don't think that we've ever really run into a team being featured on Hard Knocks that had the same level of expectations, aspirations as the Bills do right now. So I'm not really concerned about that. What I am really excited for is the personalities that we have on this team and how it all comes together, and just getting to know some of these players a little bit more. And we've seen it in the past with like Embedded, where the team, the organization kind of picks a few players that they want to key on, and we've seen like an uptick in Christian Benford and Shakir, and these are guys that have just gotten big paydays from the Bills, and they're setting up to be like franchise cornerstone type of guys. So like, yeah, get to know them a little bit more. But I'm thinking about the personalities that we have on this team, like Trey White back in the building, Max Hairston, who we just drafted, being this big personality, seeing them working together, competing against each other. Like, that's going to be super fun. We got Keon Coleman, like, everything that he's touched with a microphone in front of him has been enjoyable to watch. And like seeing him year over year, another year in the system. We got the Snowman, always much watched, much CTV. Just a ton of personalities on this team. And then being able to see Josh Allen, the leader, seeing some of the stuff they do off the field to build like this tight-knit group that they have that vibes on all kinds of levels and like the brotherhood that we see. And for me, I just want to kind of compare that to some of these other teams that we've seen featured on Hard Knocks, like the teams that have not been successful and have failed and been like perennially bad teams. I'm interested to see what the Bills look like compared to these other teams. And it's been such a buzzword around the Bills since Bean and McDermott came to town. And they've talked so much about culture. And that's not unique to the Bills. Like, culture is a conversation all over the place in the NFL. But it feels different in Buffalo. And to get kind of a behind the scenes look at how they build and maintain that culture and what that looks like, it's not like a tangible thing that you can be like, they have good culture and they don't, and you can just know looking at it. So like I said, any extra access that I can get to the Bills, like, sign me up for it. And especially it being in training camp time where you're ramping up to tough roster decisions and preseason games. And like, I know a lot of people don't like preseason games out there because they barely resemble football. I personally love it because you get a chance to see some of these developmental guys that you get to see where they're at, and they might not contribute for 2-3 years, and you can remember different guys that you liked for different reasons that you thought might make an impact. I love seeing all that stuff. So like coming right at the end of a long off season and we go through like June, July with no real football news coming out. You're through June, July. Those are the times that I get like the push notifications that like if I see the Bills name on a push notification I get in like June, I'm concerned because that's the time of the year that all these NFL arrests and all that crap happens. June, July is no news is good news season for me. So coming off of all that, the dog days of summer till football comes back, just having that like overload of training camp stuff happening, preseason games happening. Oh yeah, each week I get to watch an episode of the Bills on Hard Knocks leading right into the season. I'm here for it. I love any extra coverage that we can get. So yeah, super excited for that. Hope you are too. Little bit of a shorter episode this week. I do have some stuff planned going forward, looking ahead to the 2026 offseason, some roster decisions that we'll have to make, maybe some extension candidates. We're going to talk more about the James Cook contract situation. I have what I think are some spicy thoughts on the Cook contract situation. We're going to get into that next week. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Make sure you're not missing any episodes as we go through this off season. We are still going to have content coming out every week. There will be a couple week break coming up at some point. We haven't really decided when that will be yet, but I will make sure to let you know. Best way to make sure you're not missing any episodes, hit that subscribe button and you'll see us coming out. Thank you again for joining me as always. Look forward to the rest of our conversations through this off season as we gear up for the 2025 season. We will see you next week. Until then, and as always, go Bills.